So it was a couple of days ago, as of uploading this video, that I have talked a little bit with some of my friends about being bullied, about who I was. So partly that was about my skin colour. This is about the other part that I was very often bullied about, which is either hatred, plain hatred, or misunderstanding of non-binary gender identity. I'm partly to blame because at the time I came out, all I made was a simple non-edited short. So I wanted to be able to elaborate on that a little bit further, especially for people who are in my boat and either being bullied or have been bullied about non-binary gender identity, or who are questioning who they really are. So I've got some pages up about what non-binary really means, and non-binary can be seen as a kind of umbrella term in which every gender identity fits that does not really fit within the gender binary. So in the gender binaries, there's either full men or women. So let's talk a little bit about the truth behind the binary. That is, of course, before much of anything else in this video, including my own experiences. And I'm going to be using this little drawing pad and Inkscape to make some drawings that are going to explain this, rather than physical paper, because I wanted to be able to finish this kind of quickly, and it's a great way to tell the story. So I'm going to switch over to my simple screen recorder and see what happens. So let's talk about the gender binary and things that exist outside of it, aka the non-binary gender identity. And we're going to say, for starters, that some idiots like Donald Trump think that there are only two genders, male and female. This is not only hate speech in of itself, because it basically negates the existence of non-binary people, but this also typically comes with transphobia by saying that these genders are immutable, so that and sometimes even anti-feminism by saying that the genders each have their own role. So according to conservative idiots, or at least some idiots, we have a group of men and a group of women. I'm drawing them in the opposite order here, and there's a clear and distinct separation between them, like this. So let's just call this the conservative view. Okay, so with that, I'm going to delete that and talk about a more inclusive view instead, by saying that there are three areas in which gender exists. So we have gender as in biological sex, which is the sexual characteristics and chromosomes that one has. We have gender identity, which is the psychological and sociological interpretation. In other words, who you are in your mental or true identity. And we have gender expression, which is exactly what it says it is. So let's draw the first square for biological sex and remove the fill and instead have a line color, because you're going to see this coming, but this is going to be a Venn diagram. Okay. With that mentality of the Venn diagram in, I'm going to make a circle of men, and let's see if the right order this time, and a circle of women. Now, due to the opaqueness setting, as well as the fact that these are not squares but circles, you may notice, as I'm moving things around, and even then, that there is an overlap and a space, which is people of neither male or female sexual characteristics. Both of these cases are kind of rare, and they're referred to commonly as intersex. So let me label these up. Yeah, not always is my keyboard really working that well, so, but here we go. So I'm going to change the drawing a little bit in multiple ways. So kind of gets weird when you're filming something, even if it's just on a computer, but there we go. Notice that there's still an overlap. This I'm going to label gender identity. In other words, how one experiences gender at all. Now watch out. Biological sex is dividable into three real categories: male, female, and intersex. But with gender identity, we are all of a sudden looking at a spectrum. So let's fill in a new square, which is going to exemplify that spectrum. So let's see how I do this. I'm going to pink on the left and blue on the right. Okay, we've got a bit of an issue there. Okay. I'm just going to be solving this off camera for the moment. Here I am again with the recording, and as you can see, there is a spectrum. So on the left side is masculinity, on the right side is femininity, and I'm going to draw some lines to indicate, and basically that is pretty much everywhere where these circles overlap or a person exists outside of these. So that is the spectrum of people. And for gender expression, it's pretty much a similar story. So that is, I would draw it in the same circle, even though it's actually going to be a different one. We've got everything ready to tell you that, yes, in this spectral model, so it's just something, but in this spectral model, intersex people exist here, and non-binary people exist here. However, they don't necessarily mean the same. An intersex person, again, has sexual characteristics that don't really fall within male or female definition. A non-binary person, a person who is non-binary that is, has a gender identity that falls in between male and female, or outside the gender side of the spectrum altogether, in the white area, in this square. Yes, this Venn diagram tells non-binary people, contrary to the belief of conservative idiots, exist. In fact, without them, the whole LGBTQ plus wouldn't include them. You cannot include something that doesn't exist. And if we have to have a debate about what does and doesn't exist, we're probably worse off better throwing a gook on ourselves. That last part is a joke, but it does go to show that non-binary identities exist. But because conservative idiots think that they don't exist, as well as because some people misunderstand what it means to be non-binary, non-binary people are often bullied a lot. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about these bullying experiences for a little moment, after I return the microphone back to my camera. But before I continue, there's a little bit of an update for you. I've actually been able to, a day after I made the drawings, do a bit more research about intersex, and I've since read that intersexual people have a discrepancy actually between the typically between the phenotypical sex, so the sexual characteristics that they are born with. That is what I've always meant, and what I'm always going to mean whenever I say biological sex, unless otherwise stated. And the chromosomal sex, which is another thing, that is the genetic encoding of the sex in the X and Y chromosomes. Typically, these do equate to each other, but intersex people have an inconsistency that places them in the overlap between male and female biological sex. So someone actually commented under the short that I have made that I've actually just used the they them markers on DeviantArt. That's a very common pronoun for non-binary people. At that time I was more questioning myself. Do I really fall into the gender identity that's associated with the sex I was assigned birth? That is, men, masculine. And when I looked at myself, I came to realise that that may not really be the case. This was further confirmed right on my birthday, when I noticed some feminine parts in myself and my personality, and I made a little short about it. These are the most exciting words I've ever said here, but even though technically I am a real man, I don't feel that way. But I don't feel like a woman either. I feel like something in between. I have a non-binary gender identity. And really try to look a little bit like in the middle between the two genders. Pinkies of nail polish and the lip balm that I'm using. Anyway. And it was after that short that exactly what I was kind of afraid of actually happened. I was bullied by a lot of people who I think they refused to understand what non-binary gender identities were. So they started asking me really, really annoying questions like, who are you really? What are you? If you're not a man, you're a woman. You're, are you an insert object here? Are you an insert object here? What are you? They just can't fathom the existence of non-binary people, which we have demonstrated in this video. Now on transitioning and transgender and how that all fits with non-binary people. Now the word to transition, for those people who try to say that between quotation marks or whatever, literally just means changing from one form, style to another. And in transgender, that basically just means anything that changes one's body or expression towards one's internal gender rather than the biological sex assigned at birth. This is something done very commonly by people who are experiencing some kind of gender dysphoria, which is when you're highly unhappy and distressed because of a mismatch between your gender identity and the sex assigned at birth. Now, long story short, there are three kinds of transition. A social transition is where it typically starts. That is when you come out and you might use a new name and pronouns in daily life and changing your expression. A legal transition is changing your legal name and the gender that is in your identity card or passport. And finally, a medical transition is any medical treatments that are done to align your body with your gender identity as opposed to your assigned sex at birth. This may include voice therapy, hormonal treatments, and gender-affirming surgeries, typically done in the supervision of a doctor to make sure that your health is kept in check and that everything turns out as you desire. Now, for binary trans people, it's typically a full process that goes from fully being your assigned sex at birth to fully being the opposite sex on the spectrum, like male to female. However, for non-binary transition, some people do go trans-masculine or trans-feminine. That is mostly or completely going from a masculine body to a feminine body. That's called trans-fem, and the opposite is called trans-masc. However, you can also do partial steps of either or both transitions as you see fit. And transition may not be really necessary to all non-binary people. However, the majority of people seem to come up with their own style and expression. So for me, for instance, what you might have seen in that little short that I've thrown in this video, I started off with some lip balm and a pink with a kind of red nail polish. And that's been going fine for a while until I ended up getting some eye makeup. Now at first I was using one of those little boxes with both the red and the glitter in it. I found that fit me pretty well, as well as a eye pencil. That little box was the eyeshadow. However, the eye pencil, I didn't really use it too much. I was still learning, and it expired whilst I was living in dorm, as the little shadow box actually broke as well, so I had to replace those. As you can see on my channels everywhere, for sometimes even for a while, my pronouns they, them. During the last Pride in Amsterdam last year or 2 years ago, I've actually bought this little pen. These are kind of common. They're called pronoun pens, and they show your preferred pronouns. This one specifically has they from they, them, and the French language word IEL, which is the French translation of that pronoun. And there are many different languages that recognize pronouns outside of the standard gender pronouns, but not all languages do that, even at the moment. And it was pretty much a little bit later on, after I defined my pronouns and gone through some basic makeup steps, that I also started to wear blouses over or even instead of t-shirts, which are still fitting quite loosely. I just thought that would fit me one day all of a sudden, Sometimes transitions are very well planned in advance. Other times, like in my case, they just happen. In fact, later on still, quite recently, I just realized that some kind of herbal microdosing of estrogen could lead to changing characteristics of myself. I'm not really under the supervision of a doctor for that. I just thought that using herbal estrogen supplements might work for me, and it's still been going alright at the moment. And that is both with my general health and with some very slight feminization of myself at the moment. Now with hormones, it's no matter your dose and your method of administering, for instance, between injections, pills, and herbal topical application, which is the one that I'm going for. Pretty much anything else is at doses that will definitely require medical supervision, and that's generally recommended by health practitioners, that you do at least consult them from time to time. There is a myth that certain low doses allow you to tailor what happens to your body, but of course the answer to that is no. These get picked up by your bloodstream, and what happens to you just depends on where they end up. And with that out of the way, well, I'm just gonna see how my transition ends up, and In any case, I will see you next time. Bye bye! I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do, please give a thumbs up and share this video with all your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.